And so I'm just really happy that William Stafford could be here tonight to read for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right back there? Can't hear you. Oh, I can hear you. All right, maybe I'll yell. Now can you hear me? Back there? You hear me? All right. I'll do my best. My father could hear a little animal step or a moth in the dark against the screen, and every far sound called the listening out into places where the rest of us had never been. More spoke to him from the soft, wild night than came to our porch for us on the wind. We would watch him look up, and his face go keen, till the walls of the world flared, widened. My father heard so much that we still stand, inviting the quiet by turning the face, waiting for a time when something in the night will touch us too from that other place. I want to start just saying off, this is called Listening. It's something I wrote quite a while back. But I want to go to some things recent. But first I want to stop for a minute again and invite those who are farther away, come down, come down. My voice is going. I don't know. Well, there isn't any microphone. The nearer the better. But I want to promise you that I know why you sat back there, and when you're ready to leave, it's okay. You can leave wherever you are. It's all right. I was going to say I'm sort of used to it. Well, since Bill was so accurate as to say I'm writing now, I want to read something from today. You know, I don't want to be the kind of person who used to write and now travels around reading those things. So, today, from an experience yesterday, Taliesin. Make walls out of the earth color, masonry, stone, mix it, pile it, and form it in various ways, walk in it, around and through it. Let it invite sun in partly, but shed rain. Then look down its vistas, that long shade you are going, cape, wide hat. Look tall in those doors, then gone. Wives die, children crash and scatter. The city you spurned creeps toward your feet. The desert rustles, greasewood, Palo Verde, Saguaro, on forever north, wide shoulders, hardly bent like yours. Well, it's an impressive thing. Of course, this whole area is impressive. Kansas is fine, but there are a few things okay here. So it was fun to visit there. And since I mentioned Kansas, let me go back a little way for something that's called One of the Many Dreams of Childhood. Is it okay now? Can you hear me? Floorboards of an old car, shaking and rattling, and a steady throb under me as we bump along a country road. My father talking and driving, and Shamasco beside him, all those knees, my back rest as I crouch under the dashboard, my only place left as the family return late from a picnic. It is dim down there, and I'm shivering from an icy wind whipping in from the night. My arm hurts where Mother jerked me aside when I spilled my chocolate. The little cave where I huddle is dark, but my own, and I shiver and croon to my hurt arm. It is only later I learn the words for my condition. Being shunted aside, neglectful parents, my bruised arm, battered child, my delicious shivering, the first stages of hypothermia. It was only later that I learned these wonderful terms for how we thought everybody lived in Kansas. I want to try. I want to be ambitious and try to deserve the invitation to come here. This is called Serving with Gideon. Now I remember, in our town, the druggist prescribed Coca-Cola mostly in tapered glasses to us and to the elevator man in a paper cup so he could drink it elsewhere because he was black. And now I remember the Legion, gambling in the back room, no women, but girls, old boys who ran the town. They were generous to their sons or the sons of friends, and of course I was almost one. I remember winter light closing its great blue fist slowly eastward along the street, and the dark then deep as war arched over a radio show called The 30s in the great old USA. Look down, stars. I was almost one of the boys. My mother was folding her handkerchief. The library seethed and sparked. Right and wrong arced, and carefully I walked with my cup toward the elevator man. Not long ago, I was in a town in Wyoming. I know we're friends, but I guess I won't tell you which one. Anyway, I was there at a motel downtown, and the next morning I was to find my way up to the community college. And on my way up, while I walked around that night, I saw a big sign that said, for a movie, The Far Riders. It was some big tough guys on big tough horses. I walked past the Legion Hall, gambling back there. I went up to the campus, walked down the hall. It had the leaders, a man, a man, a man, a man, a man. I could go on. And way down at the end, a woman. So I went up to look. Oh, secretary. So I went into the classroom, and they said, "What do you think of our town?" I said, "It's a chauvinist place," just to start in a friendly manner. They wondered why I said that. Well, there's material. Whenever we're together like this, many of us, and maybe most of us, are writers, so it's all right to stop for a minute. There's material everywhere. Now, this is an example. Recently, I was at Moorhead State in Minnesota for a contrast place, and on the campus, I was reading the campus newspaper. This was last spring, early spring. And there was an article on the editorial page, and it said that Moses, the biology department's iguana, had died. This is news at Moorhead State, has a headline, "Moses is gone," the iguana. And this iguana was kept in a box at the entrance to the biology department, and students liked Moses. So, this was a real news event. And they said, we have decided, in Moses' honor, to give $15 for the best poem written for Moses. And to get it, to qualify to try, you have to be employed by Morehead State. And I suddenly thought, today I'm employed by Morehead State, so I began to write. And so this is a lesson in biology for Moses, the biology department's iguana at Morehead State University. Moses, my name, a box, my home, I lived and measured earth with my length so close, so dear to my belly, my hands. And students I studied, each in a box invisible but exactly there and firm around them, clear as the air. At night no one heard my lonely cries, exiled here in a world strange as a dream that no one understands. Long earth, farewell, and students who stared, goodbye. Moses has gone away, who lived so lonely among you, so quiet and kind. Well, that night in my reading, I read a lesson in biology. They didn't rush up with the $15. Nothing like that happened. You're always thinking maybe something really good will happen. But after I got home, 2 or 3 days after I got home, I got a phone call from Morehead State. It said, I'm so-and-so in the history department, and I'm in charge of giving the prize for the poem for Moses. And I thought, good. And she said, I understand you read a poem about Moses that night. And if you'll send me a copy, I'll print it in the school paper. No $15. I don't know who won. So later last spring, I was at Marshall, Minnesota. All sorts of things happen up there. And there were some people from the Twin Cities, journalists. And they had heard about Morehead State. And so I said, yeah, I wrote a poem about Moses. And they said, oh, you hadn't heard, but in the Twin Cities, there have been many articles in the paper because animal rights people learned that at Morehead, they intended to get another iguana and put it in a box. And they didn't think any iguana should have to live in a box and stare at students all day, so they were agitated. Let's say this program wants to show you a different country. It's the one that your life conceals, the one waiting outside when curtains are drawn, the one grandmother hinted at in her crochet design, the one almost found over at the edge of music after the sermon. It's the way life is, and you have it. A few years given. You get killed now and then, violated in various ways, and sometimes it's turnabout. You get tired of that. Long suffering, you wait and pray, and maybe good things come. Maybe the hurt slackens and you hardly feel it anymore. You have a breath without pain. That is called happiness. It's a balance. The taking and passing along, the composting, where you've been, and how people and weather treated you. It's a country where you already are, bringing where you've been. Time offers this gift in its millions of ways, turning the world, moving the air, calling every morning, here, take it, it's yours. It's called the gift. And now, while I was bellowing this out, I suddenly realized, can you hear me too well? Is it too loud? Sounds loud up here. That reminds me, I was at a big conference in the East. In other words, a good one, as they say. Bread loaf. Well, I was walking toward where there was going to be a reading that night, and John Gardner, who was there at that time, and I were walking along, and he was talking about some other writer there and how mean he was. And he said, when I gave a reading here last year, they couldn't hear me. Something went wrong. And the people in the back were yelling louder, louder. And this mean guy was sitting up in the front, and he was saying, softer, softer. This is St. Matthew and all. Laureen, we thought she'd come home, but it got late, and then days. Now it has been years. Why shouldn't she if she wanted? I would. Something comes along, a sunny day, you start walking, you meet a person who says, follow me, and things lead on. Usually it wouldn't happen, but sometimes the neighbors notice your car is gone, the patch of oil in the driveway, and it fades. They forget. In the Bible it happened. Fishermen, Levites, they just went away and kept going. Thomas, away off in India, never came back. But Lorene, it was a stranger maybe, and he said, your life, I need it. And nobody else did. Last night, someone was referred, this was fame. I suddenly thought, hey, someone referred to a poem of mine. I must confess, the one they referred to was called Ode to Garlic. And so I want to read that here. Sudden it comes for you in the cave of yourself where you know and are lifted by important events. Say you're dining and it happens. Soaring like an eagle, you are pierced by a message from the midst of life. Memory, what holds the days together, touches your tongue. It is from deep in the earth, and it reaches out kindly, saying, hello, old friend. It makes us alike, all offspring of powerful forces, part of one great embrace of democracy, united across every boundary. You walk out generously, giving it back in a graceful wave what you've been given. Like a child again, you breathe on the world and it shines. Well, what happened was that I got a call from a restaurant in Portland, Oregon, saying, is your name Stafford? Yeah. You're a writer? Yeah. Well, if you'll write a poem about garlic, we're going to have a banquet, 7-course meal, all courses including dessert based on garlic. And if you'll write something about garlic, we'll print your poem on the menu, and you and your wife may have free tickets for the banquet. And they cost $35 a piece. So I said to my wife, you want a meal that costs $35? Yes, Bill. So I wrote Ode to Garlic. And they did, they printed. And then, I want you to, I think the way it gets known, though, it was pirated by the Garlic Times of Gilroy, California. This is the trouble with reading. When goats like a book, the whole book is gone. And the meaning has to go find an author again. But when we read, it's just print, deciphering like frost on a window. We learn the meaning, but lose what the frost is, and all that world pressed so desperately behind. So sometime let's discover how the ink feels to be clutching all that eternity onto page after page. But maybe it is better not to know. Ignorance, that wide country, rewards you just to accept it. You plunge, it holds you, and you become a rich darkness. Well, I was teaching at the University of Alaska in the summer. It's never dark in June. And I was walking on the campus the first day, and I was looking for the place where I was supposed to be. It's called the Graining Building. Graining was a governor, and a good one, of Alaska. I say good. Controversial and good. And so I was looking for Graining. And that light, which they're so proud of up there, I suddenly realized, what am I doing? I'm looking for a word, Graining, and I'm not even seeing it. If I didn't know how to read, I'd see it. But since I know how to read, all I do is read. You know, we lose something, right? Well, a life, a ritual. My mother had a child, one dark like her, but bland, wide gaze, who stared where eternity was, then back to her eyes and the world. A blanket protected, a song instructed, and the years came along. There are people whose game is success, but others hear distance. Guided, often betrayed, they wander their lives. Their voices go by every day, outside of history, outside of importance. They ritual whatever they do. My mother is nothing now. Her child, wide gaze like hers, remembers the blanket and a song that taught how to lose. Oh, shadow that came large on a wall, then face that recognized mine. This distant song about failure is for you, is for you. The reason I dithered a little bit then, I was looking, what shall I read? And I realized I'd read Ode to Garlic and Moses and so on. And I wanted to try to be all things to all people, I guess. So for one thing, I put together some variety, I hope. But I'll drop back. This is called The Big House. She was a modern, you know. He, you know, dealt in land. They maintained, you know, several gardens. You know, when the wind blows, their flowers are famous. Their house was well built, they say. And they say the foundation had rock under it. Some of the walls, they say, were 2 feet thick. An artist, they say, designed the door handle. Construction took, I don't know how long, and I don't know how many bedrooms. They needed, I don't know how big a plan, but the whole thing, I don't know how, fell down. They're gone, they say, you know, I don't know where. Now, I thought, as I started to read this, I sort of like to start reading it. Is he stupid enough to say that again? And again, and again, and then I just hoped that as I ricocheted down the stanzas, you thought, oh no, not that phrase again. And so and then at the end to pile them all up. It's just so much fun. And maybe one of the things you do when you write is you start to do something and you just keep right on doing it, no matter how dumb it is. Earlier, we were meeting in a class. We didn't really get going, and I'm sorry, I talked too fast, too soon. But there was this kind of, all sorts of things came up, and this about letting whatever you start keep right on was one of the things I was hoping to get in there. Well, this summer, I already boasted to some friends I have here. We were saying where we've been and so on. And where have you been? And I said, I taught a workshop on a sailboat up in the San Juan Islands. It didn't work very well, too distracting, but it was fun. And the first morning, we decided that we'd write. And so we were at Friday Harbor. We said, let's walk around Friday Harbor before we start the sailing, and we'll write something that we see. So it was early morning, and I went up all along Main Street, and I looked in a drugstore. On the book rack at Corner Drugs, Second Chance at Love leans toward passions wild and free and stares across at Impossible to Forget, but There Is No Tomorrow, hiding behind the big label Romance, can't obscure Circle of Deception and the faded, torn cover of Trust in Love. You can buy cures for these books back in prescriptions, or if you have money or a car and can drive out to the high school dance where addicts of life grope toward this book rack. Or you can lean against this window pane and imagine the ladies who wrote these lives. The frilled collars of Mimi Furion and Antonelle Raimondo, and the chipped coffee cup beside the typewriter of that impassioned veteran, Reba Swanson, carefully spelled with an E, putting it elegantly on the cover of her umpteenth novel, Waiting for a Star, and then turning to wash the breakfast dishes in the afternoon light, the old cereal bowl for her golden wedding husband, Good Morning Grumpy, printed on its side. But for us writers, the world is just scrambling toward us all the time with these things. And I hope it's all right to say that I think I stole word for word the titles, but I was afraid to steal the authors' names. Back east, they have these ideas, I don't know, about slander and so on. So I just thought someone might be here from not one of us, but somebody else. So I made up the names. And I'm proud of that. I really had good names. But once you get in the mood, it's there. Oh, it's wonderful. And sure enough, there was that coffee cup on the side, printed, Good Morning Grumpy. Well, I was with a writer named Marvin Bell up in Alaska a few years ago. And as we were leaving, he said, if you write something you think might interest me, you could send it, and it might stir me to write something, and I'd write back, and we'd get something going. To me, it was like playing Annie over. And so we did. And a book eventuated called Segways. The editor had to teach me what that word meant. I didn't know. It was his idea. But this was in that book. Marvin knows all sorts of things, he says. He knows all sorts of things. And he even said, I've heard him say a ridiculous thing like this, I'm really good at wearing hats, things like that. But he wrote about music. And so this is an area where I really have to stretch. But I wrote in response, Key of C, an interlude for Marvin. Sometime nothing has happened. We are home at the beginning of summer. Somebody begins to breathe chords on a harmonica. Why don't we tell how our lives will be, Sarah says. I'll start. When I finish college, I'll move east and work in a bank. In a robbery there, a stray bullet will kill me. Tom quits playing the harmonica. I'll work in Dad's drugstore. My wife and child will die in a fire when the child is 3. He goes on breathing slow notes. Mary leans back in the porch swing. I'll marry Tom, and oh, I'll hold the little one so close. I see exactly, Steve says. After the war, I'll come back here and you'll all be gone. I don't want to tell the rest. They turn to me. I'll live carefully and a long time. Years from now, when I'm writing to a friend, I'll tell him what we said today and how it all came true. And oh, Marvin, even this part I'm telling you. Now, this is a strange thing to write. It doesn't feel like the same thing as having good ideas. It feels like finding them through the process of writing. Bill was kind enough to mention books about writing. I'll quote a sentence from one. There's a chapter in there called A Way of Writing, and the first sentence says something like this: a writer is not so much someone who has ideas and the skill to enable the saying them, as a writer is someone who's found a way into a process that will bring about things to say that never would have occurred to anyone if the process hadn't been entered. In other words, I want to make a claim for the actual creative part of writing. And it never occurred to me before to have these people framed on a front porch where nothing is happening. I just like to say, sometimes nothing is happening. It's not a very promising beginning, nothing is happening. But then it just keeps, nothing is happening. So then when they begin to talk, something went over in my head while I was writing the poem and said, I'll have them say what's going to happen, really. And then all these terrible things begin to happen. Human beings are strange. Why is it fun to write about something that has all this harrowing stuff in it? It's not my idea. St. Augustine said that. He said, how strange it is. We go to a tragedy, and the worse it is, the better we think it is. That's in a wonderful book, Confessions of St. Augustine. This is called Aunt Mabel. Our town is haunted by many good deeds that reappear like a country cousin or a truth when language falters these days trying to lie, because Aunt Mabel, an old lady gone now, would accost even strangers to give bright flowers away quick as a striking snake. Its deeds like this have weakened me, shaken by intermittent trust, stricken with friendliness. Our senator talked like war, and Aunt Mabel said, he's a brilliant man, but we didn't elect him that much. Everyone's resolve weakens toward evening, or in a flash when a face melds, a stranger's even, reminded for an instant between menace and fear. There are Aunt Mabels all over the world, or their graves in the rain. Now, after I had written this, I was teaching a course in world literature, and it was taught from one of those great big Norton anthologies. Too big, heavy. It's rich, and the pages are thin. There's a lot of stuff in there, but too big. I was in my office, and I suddenly thought, this is on the first day, I got out my pocket knife, really sharp, and I just cut down the spine, and I cut that book in about 4 parts. And then I held it together and went to class and set it down. And I said, some things in this book, this book is too big, I said. Obvious thing. You've got to do unusual things in class. This book is too big. There's some things I'm not going to read. There are things in there I don't think I want to have in my head. So immediately they get restive. What's going on? don't you think it'd be good for you? And so, it was wonderful. They began to harangue me. No, I'm not going to read some of this stuff. I said, this is the part, and I pulled out a section and held it up, little thin section. And a woman on the front row went, huh. Turned out she was a librarian. Well, in this part was a story by Solzhenitsyn called Matryona's Home. Maybe some of you know it. It's great. And when they first started talking about Solzhenitsyn, I wasn't going to read Solzhenitsyn because I thought Washington, D.C. adopted him because they knew the powers over there didn't like him, therefore he's good, and that's not enough for me. But then I read some, and it was good. And that's a wonderful story. And at the very end of the story, oh, he just did it right. Matryona, even the name, even her name, okay? Matryona. Matryona, terrible things happened. And her house, gone. And he said it was not until then, he says something like this, the way the translation was that I read, something like this. It was only later we began to understand that she was the kind of person without whom our village couldn't last, nor our whole land. Good emphatic. And you find I didn't find that, I found it first. Well, I found it separate. And writing leads you to all sorts of things like that. With Aunt Mabel, I mean. This is called Incident. They had this cloud that kept like a zeppelin tethered to a smokestack, and you couldn't see it. But it sent out these strange little rays, and after a while you felt funny. They had this man with a box. He pointed it at the zeppelin, and it said, Jesus. The man hurried farther away and called out, Hear ye, hear ye. Then they coaxed the zeppelin down into the smokestack, and they said, we won't do that anymore. For a long time, the box kept shaking its head, but it finally said, okay, forget it. But quietly to us, it whispered, let's get out of here. Now, in that class today, we were talking about whether you want to take everybody along when you're writing a poem or a story, and I said, no, some people aren't active enough, they're not going to come. Leave them out. When I had this poem, I address this to writers here. I write this from the way Mozart composed, say, wow, that would be nice. But anyway, I write it I just wrote it, and the pattern came to me, and they say we won't do that anymore, and so on. And I thought, what shall I do with this? I'll call it Incident. And I'll send it to that new little literary magazine near 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania. No problem. They published it. Yeah. And it's sort of strange because I think the meanest thing I say in it, the meanest thing I did in writing this poem was to quote exactly what they said. We won't do that anymore. Kind of a shiver went over me when I put it down. But that's the trouble with artists, with us artists. That's the trouble with poets or Solzhenitsyn. You can't depend on them. They are going to write things that national policy hasn't been cleared on yet. Now I want to do some really little things. This is called The Little Girl by the Fence at School. Grass that was moving found all shades of brown, moved them along, flowed autumn away, galloping southward where summer had gone. And that was the morning someone's heart stopped and all became still. A girl said, "Forever?" And the grass, "Yes, forever." While the sky, well, I feel ambitious to say something here. Maybe what we're looking for when we write, without knowing exactly what we're looking for a chance to tell the truth. And I say we don't know what, because I always thought it was hard to lie. You had to make things up. Now I think it's hard to tell the truth. And you stumble over it. And once you stumble over it, you're not going to give it up. Even though the Kremlin doesn't like it or the White House doesn't like it, it's not going to get you invited to the White House. So what? You just got to say it. And you find that you have been, that maybe what you're writing is a context for things you always in your life wanted to say, and you didn't even know you wanted to say them until you come to them. There's sometimes it feels like that. Well, this is called coming back. Near your face, a breath. Your dog, it's day. Into those dark eyes, receiver wells, responsible for all there is, you fall and come back new, brushed by such deep love, the world fades. The world fades, and brushed by such deep love, comes back new, you fall, responsible for all there is, those dark eyes, receiver wells, near your face, a breath, your dog, it's day. We had a dog, a Siberian Husky, those blue eyes, an obstreperous dog. Oh, it liked people, no good as a watchdog. And it was strangely courteous in the early morning. I'd be asleep, and something, I'd open my eyes, there would be Leaf, his nose right down by my, he hadn't said anything, it's all okay. Go ahead and sleep, I'll just breathe on your face, that's all. So as soon as the dog would see my eyes open, his tail would begin to go, it's great, you're the most wonderful person in the world, all those things the dog makes you feel. That's where that came from. This is called first grade. In the play, Amy didn't want to be anybody, so she managed the curtain. Sharon wanted to be Amy, but Sam wouldn't let anybody be anybody else. He said it was wrong. All right, Steve said, I'll be me, but I don't like it. So Amy was Amy, and we didn't have the play, and Sharon cried. How easy these things are. Big deal. Is that in the play? Amy didn't want to be anybody. It takes artistry to write a sentence like, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. What is it? I felt great satisfaction out of this, but I don't know why. And I found out when I read it, there's a strange reaction. People can't believe it. Is this a poem? So I'll say this. A poem is something you write and you send to the poetry editor. If they take it, it's a poem. That's the way I say it. I sent this to, with some others, to Ontario Review in response to a request from Joyce Carol Oates, who writes these big things. And I just stuck it in. They took it. So it's a poem. And you should show proper respect, okay? This is called Reading with Little Sister, a Recollection. The stars have died overhead in their great cold. Beneath us the sled whispers along. Back there our mother is gone. They tell us, if you hold on, the dogs will take you home. And they tell us never to cry. We'll die too, they say, if we are ever afraid. All night we hold on. The stars go down. We are never afraid. I've used this several times recently. I can't forego using it again. I know you heard me say this not long ago. How easy it is to write. Think of it. The stars have died overhead in their great cold. Beneath us the sled whispers along. Back there our mother is. How easy. Right? I want to, and it may seem that I'm just saying this out of some kind of arrogance or something. No. We need in our inner lives, in ourselves, and in friendly circumstances, to pay attention to what comes along for us in our lives. And if you're a writer, I think the knack, a certain kind of writing, creative writing, the knack is to be so easy with what comes to you that you welcome it, even if it doesn't seem worthy of the person you thought you were. Alas, it's exactly worthy of the person you happen to be. And what you ought to do is settle for that. Nietzsche said, how lucky we are to have had Mozart in the world. He had a certain, and this is the phrase I got of the translation of Nietzsche I was reading, courtesy of the heart. And I think that's what we need to get. Cultivate. We all have it, but we're scared from it. It's not worthy, it's only us. Or it's not what the editors are taking now, or it's not what national policy says. Big deal. It's what God says, or, well, whatever. Now, I brought along, since I've done so much about this, how easy it is, in my other pocket, I didn't know whether I wanted to turn to this, but I want to do this is not a confession poem, but I want to confess something about this poem. Here is the poem. Back here are the places where it went before it was published. I want to read both sides. And I'm looking at my friends, the writers, out here. Okay? This is called Clash. The butcher knife was there on the table my father made. The hatchet was on the stair. I knew where it was. Hot wires burned in the wall. All the nails pointed in. At the sound of my mother's call, I knew it was the time. When she threatened, I hid in the yard. Policemen would come for me. It was dark. Waiting was hard. There was something I had to win. After my mother wept, I forgot where the hatchet was. There was a truce we kept. We both chose real things. If she taunted, I grew still. If she faltered, I lowered the knife. I did not have to kill. Time had made me stronger. I won before too late, and adult before she died, I had traveled from love to hate and partway back again. Now all I have, my life, strange, comes partly from this. I thought about a knife when I heard that great word, choose. Now, I was teaching at Lake Forest College, north of Chicago, and there was a woman in the class, and she came around to me and she said they were cleaning out the English department recently, and back of an old desk was this old literary magazine, and in it was your poem Clash. And it was as if someone had handed me something that's in my life. She said, I have a teenager. I began to think, I don't want to hear it anymore. And she began to talk about her life and how this poem zeroed in on her life that had been lost back of the desk. I'd forgotten it myself. And I was thinking, writing is sort of like pure math. Not worth anything. It's not anything. But somehow it loops around. It connects with physics or something every now and then. And in the world, there it is, waiting for this, whatever it is. Well, I said I'd read this is how desperate I was, and desperate I am. These are the places it went. This is a litany of heroic names. Bottega. Hardly a man or woman is now alive who remembers this heroic magazine. Bottega Obscure. Harper's Bazaar. They publish poetry. Maybe they still do. I don't know. New Yorker. Poetry. Saturday Review. New World Writing. Colorado Quarterly. Nation. Paris Review. Contact. New Berkeley Review. December. San Francisco Review. Inland. They accepted it, but then the magazine folded before it could be printed. Southwest Review, Northwest. See, I'm really getting desperate. Southwest, Northwest. Experiment. Bill Marks, he was doing some kind of anthology. Stand, Chicago Choice. Finally, it was published by a magazine called The Fair in Terre Haute, Indiana. And I told this story at a college in Florida. There was an old professor, almost as old as I was, sitting in the back. And he made a start when I said this was published in the Fair. I saw him. And he went out, he went down the hall, and he came back, and he had a copy of the Fair, and he said, I had a poem in the same issue of the Fair. It was years ago. At this point on the page, frightened at the slant of the writing, I looked up at the student who shared it with me. Such pain was in the crossing of each T, and a heart that skipped, lurched in the loop of the Y. Sorrowing for the huddled lines my eyes had seen, the terror of those O's and A's and those draggled G's. I looked up at her face, not wanting to read farther, at least by prose. The hand shook that wrote that far on the page, and what weight formed each letter, God knows. Now, I want to get to 3 other things. I'm wound up for that academic hour, and I know we've got to get out of here, and the important things happen in this area. So I'll soon be out of your way, but I want to do 3 other things. And there's a reason. This is a therapeutic reason, you writers especially. I was up at Banff in Canada, great place, the Art Center, doing a workshop. And it seemed to me that those writers all began to have excuses for things. So I wrote this. An archival print. God snaps your picture. Don't look away. This room right now, your face tilted exactly as it is before you can think or control it. Go ahead. Let it betray all the secret emergencies and still hold that partial disguise you call your character. Even your lip, they say, the way it curves or doesn't or can't decide, will deliver bales of evidence. The camera, wide open, stands ready. The exposure is 35 years or so. After that, you have become whatever the veneer is all the way through. Now you want to explain. Your mother was a certain, how to express it, influence. Yes. And your father, whatever he was, you couldn't change that. No. And your town, of course, had its limits. Go on. Keep talking. Hold it. Don't move. That's you forever. Well, pilgrims, next to the last. They come to the door, usually carrying or leading a child, always with the book held between them and the world. They quote Ezekiel, Daniel, Kings. They look at us and think of Nebuchadnezzar eating the grass. It is good to listen because maybe they're angels. Behind them the sky arches, the trees glisten in worship of the sun. These travelers in the Word and their offspring have their commission from somewhere, filtered down through mistakes, pride, greed, and plans committees make, the way pilgrims have always come. Over their shoulders, day extends its hand. Beside them, a child whimpers. It bows its head as we bow. It hungers. It cries. It will be fed. Now I want to end with a short poem. And you know, I just plunged in with my father heard a little animal or could hear or whatever. And I want to thank those who brought me and you people who were patient. And people I happen to know. There's a big network over the world. Meet you next time in Kathmandu. Who knows? Somewhere. Anyway, I'll end with this. Once in the 40s, we were alone one night on a long road in Montana. This was in winter, a big night, far to the stars. We had hitched, my wife and I, and left our ride at a crossing to go on. Tired and cold, but brave, we trudged along. This, we said, was our life, watched over, allowed to go where we wanted. We said we'd come back sometime when we got rich. We'd leave the others and find a night like this, whatever we had to give, and no matter how far, to be so happy again.
So Amy was Amy, and we didn't have the play, and Sharon cried.